Jawwad, great to spend some time with you. I know one commonality that we have is a passion around selling, and I always really like the origin story. I got into sales very much by happenstance. I'm curious, talking about sales as a career choice, how did you get started, and why have you stayed in sales over time?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it was pretty accidental as well until I found out that it could be life-changing, and then I decided to make a career out of it. I started my career out selling, well, volunteering to sell advertising space for a local magazine company. I was selling advertising space to an insurance agency, and they bought some advertising space, but they also gave me a sales job. So went from volunteering to for profit and ended up staying in financial services for almost 3 years. And then in my undergraduate program, there happened to be a sales program. There are about 37 or maybe a little bit more now in the country that, universities that teach professional sales. And, I heard one of our fellow, classmates going up the elevator talking about a career at a tech company, sparked my interest. And I was like, how did you get that? And from there, I was hooked on professional sales in my undergraduate sales program. Um,
I love that you talked about that too, that the fact that now there's actually formal education around selling. That was never the case when I was in school, and I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. Sometimes I still don't, right? But
yeah.
it's one of those things where I got into sales very much by happenstance. I thought I was going for a service type of role, and got an interview because my best friend's aunt worked at a company. I mean, that's how it works, right? It's relationships. And interviewed for this role. I got into it and found out it was pretty assertive selling. And at first, I didn't think I would have a taste for it, but over time, I developed, fortunately, God gave me a couple of things, a gift for gab and an ability to type really fast. So it was one of those things where it caught on and started to have some success. And it was so rewarding because of the relationships that I've been able to make over time. I'm so thankful for it. And I'd be curious to your vantage point. I know one of the key elements is certainly a lot of people have sales experience, but not everybody stays in it over the long haul. What has prompted you to stay in sales?
I would say it's a couple of things, and you hit on one of them, which is the relationship aspect. No one goes into insurance thinking they're going to enjoy it. I loved it. The people I sold to came back and referred more business to me, and the first 6 months was so much of a cold call and learning experience. The next 2.5 years, it paid dividends because I was getting the calls. People were telling me, we'd like to introduce you with this person and this doctor and this engineer. Selling into that professional crowd really taught me early on the importance of trust and relationship. When I pivoted into technology sales, that became ever so more important because now it was the relationship and the trust, as well as the ability to simplify complex buying behaviors and evaluations. But that you don't get to that if the first two weren't there. And so, it kind of translated across all the different sales careers I've had. But then I ended up staying. I would say I started because of the earning potential. I've stayed because of the reward you get of actually solving the problems and seeing that impact within companies. And, you see their growth or you see some sort of change in that company and you're like, oh, I had a small part in helping empower that. That to me becomes way more rewarding as my career transitions from early to mid stage now.
Have you ever thought about leaving sales?
I would always like to be customer facing. I think that is one aspect that I absolutely love, and even if I do leave sales, I'd probably be in a role where I get that interaction directly with the front line and with sales customers.
I love the originality of this topic because there's a big part of it. I tried to leave sales once. I went into more of a consulting role, and there wasn't really a selling component of it because at the time, in the role that I was in, I was tired. I was tired of the game. But it was the very same reason that brought me back to it, for the love of the game. And it was, I'm a big numbers person. I love data, love crunching numbers. I think I got that from my late aunt. She was very data driven, very tracked everything. And I'm a big believer in being a student of the game as well. I'm super inspired by Michael Jordan, greatest competitor of all time. And I look at sales is the greatest sport there is. It's frankly the sport I'm best at. I was great at basketball, but too short, right? But I've loved sales because exactly what you said. It's that customer facing element, that ability to come in, diagnose where there's an issue, align with priorities, and look for wins for everyone involved, for the customer, for yourself, for your team, for your company. That is what I am so passionate about. And so I love that you really started with the, kind of the heart of, why you're in it, and the reward that you've gotten out of it as well.
Absolutely.
We'd be remiss not to point out, Jawwad, the differences now in the selling ecosystem. I remember back when I started out in sales, and I've, in my career, I've worked in situations where I was tracking calls on spreadsheets, you're picking up a physical phone and dialing, and now compare contrast, you've got a situation where there's all kinds of digital tools and ability to connect in ways that we never had, when I started out. Curious as to your perspective on selling today. What makes it uniquely different, and how do you ensure success in today's digital selling world?
Yeah, I think it's actually a little bit harder to sell now because of all the distractions that are out there. But if you can figure out how to create engagement with your customers across different channels, then it actually becomes easier to sell. So I would say, in terms of selling in this new environment, engagement is a really big factor. Yes, you can meet with customers in a regular cadence, but what type of insight or value or even recommendations are you bringing to the customer instead of purely asking them what their problems are? Researching has become a much easier task given all the technologies and tools and information we have. It's putting that into action that actually helps the customer. And I think that's where a lot of organizations are trying to fine tune now, is how do we create action from all the insights that we are gathering. And that really is the future of where I think sales is headed. It's no longer about selling, but it's really leading and kind of strengthening the influence as customers are making their buying decisions, because we as salespeople have less and less to say, but customers have more and more questions for us across different channels.
Everything you said was so quotable. I love how you started off by saying it's actually harder to sell now. And I agree, because there's so much noise. The tools are better, but there's so many of them. So figuring out how to leverage them, it ups the ante, it ups the responsibility. We've got to be able to responsibly use these tools to research and also to work with buyers differently than we ever had before. Because like you said, they're at a different place. They can do so much research now, just like you can. They have a process just like we have a process. They can do so much more research now. And we typically come in at like that. I've read the statistics, 56, 57% of the way through the buying process is where the seller actually comes in now. So you've got less run room to actually make an impact and make a difference and develop that relationship. So it makes it all the more important, like you said, to engage with insight and value. It's easy to find and do the research, and we have a lot of these tools that give us the insights or give us buying signals, but are sellers using them, and are they using them responsibly, or are they still just trying to use the old tried and true, I'm going to send an email and just say, I'd love to connect and understand your business, or I'm just checking in to make sure that, we're still on to try to get another meeting. Are we effectively using these things? And I think that's what makes folks stand apart, is how effectively can you understand the parameters of the new playing field? What are the tools? How can I best leverage them? Do you have any tips, maybe for a seller who has struggled with transitioning to the new environment? What would you tell a seller like that? How could they start doing better today?
Come up with ideas. And the best way to do that is, if you have a customer that's in a specific industry, go research what their competitor is doing, what their complementary companies are doing, and come up with ideas, because the companies and the folks that are working in companies often don't really have the time for that research. So they're looking for ideas. Every company's looking for ideas. I've started to go away from asking to connect and asking to discuss ideas that, really grow a customer's business, and that really does tend to work.
Asking to discuss ideas. I love that. I always ask for feedback or guidance or just a conversation. Like you said, I think far too often we get caught up in putting the cart before the horse, and we're trying to have some step of the buying process or selling process before we've actually developed any type of relationship. It's all about discussions. It's a conversations game. I'm a firm believer that if I can get conversations, that's what's going to ultimately beget a relationship, and then deals are a byproduct of relationships. We can't be so focused on the deal and trying to sell something. We've got to focus on the fundamentals and the foundation. You pulled out something else very important there. What's the competition doing? I also like to find out, what are my colleagues doing that are doing it better? Who are the best? I want to find the best, and I want to figure out, what are they doing? How do I assimilate that into my arsenal? Because that's what's going to make me better. It rarely does it take food off the table for somebody else if I take their best practice and make it part of my own. And I've built an entire career off of that, just finding out, what are the greats doing? How can I make that a part of my process? How do I regurgitate their lines that work, or their activities that work? Because it's all about people, customer obsession, and process. How do we work that process? And you articulated a lot of reasons why our process has evolved over time. Our process is always going to be evolving because the playing field changes. But if we effectively address that and continue to evolve effectively, we'll be successful. The odds are with us.
I really like what you said here in terms of learning from the best, and I like to call that steal and heal. Steal the best stuff that you find from other people and heal some of your areas of opportunities. And to that point, we have really intelligent and knowledgeable buyers now. So we as sellers have to be intelligent and knowledgeable to meet their demands and their expectations.
Something else that's changed a lot is the focus on culture.
Yes.
And empathy in sales, authenticity. I recently, one of the benefits of starting these types of conversations and, some of the work that I've done in sales is that I've been able to connect with a lot of people. And Larry Levine, so he's built an entire brand off of authentic selling from the heart. And, I have conversations all the time about authentic selling. His name always comes up, but it's something that we need. It's something that we crave. And it's interesting that we find a need to call out authenticity in selling, or even empathy in selling, because it should have been something that was always part of the foundation, because relationships are at the heart. But let's face it, you look back to the old Gordon Gekko-esque or Wolf of Wall Street-esque types of selling methods. It doesn't bleed empathy or culture or authenticity, does it? Curious as to your thoughts, Jawwad, on how we've gotten to this point. Where are we succeeding with infusing these into our process? Where do we still have some work to do? I'm interested in your thoughts there.
I think there's two types of organizational cultures. And there's one that really empowers the individual so then they can go empower the customers and the partners and go impact change. And then there is another one that really looks at data and metrics to the point where it's a bit, I would say, it's a bit burning out. It may be the reason why we're seeing a great resignation, because that does not work in the long run. Yes, you can monitor the metrics that people are measured by, but if you're not empowering them, the people are your greatest assets. If you're not empowering them, they're not going to go empower the customers. So I would say that companies that have figured out the fine line of looking at data, but also understanding the human and emotional and behavioral part of all of this, to equip the sellers and the team members to go make an impact, are the ones that are really succeeding. And I think that's a really important part, because it also brings in authentic selling. If you're trusted by an organization and you're empowered, you're going to be more authentic. You're going to have more authentic days. Yes, we still have to go meet targets. We still have to hit metrics, but you're more encouraged and motivated to do that. If you're being, drilled down to look at numbers every day, over time, you're going to have less and less of those empowerment days because you're thinking about getting the deal in every single call versus solving the problem. If you solve a problem, the deal will naturally come through. It's a byproduct.
God, I love it. Our teams are people. Our
Yes.
customers are people. Data diagnoses. That's all it does. It is a look back in time to say, okay, this is where the process up to this point has led us. So what decisions might we want to make or make differently because of what the data is telling us? Are there metrics where we're strong? Awesome. Let's celebrate that. Are there metrics where we're not so strong? Okay, fair enough. Why do we think that is? Are these key metrics? Are these important metrics? If we agree that they are, do we want to modify our process in a way that addresses that metric and maybe gives us a higher probability to land that metric? And frankly, that's where I also look for those best practices. If we're not performing in a metric, that's where I'm going to go out and I'm going to find the best. Whether it's on my team, somebody who's performing, let's share that. Let's share that, replicate that success. If it's not on my team and it's somewhere else, I'm going to go out and find that. And I'm going to bring that resource to us so that we can all master that and start flexing that uncomfortable muscle at first, but over time we're going to develop it, and that's what makes people better. You've got to have that foundation of transparency and trust. I need to understand what makes my team tick. I need to understand what makes my customers tick, because ultimately you're trying to influence change. That's it. And data, cramming data down somebody's throat and say, hey, you're not selling enough of XYZ, that's not going to do anything. It's only going to make them think that you don't know what in the world you're talking about. Culture is a result of the environment that you articulated. And I think it's so important for us to understand, culture doesn't just happen overnight. Culture is something that is a byproduct of the investment in your people and your team and having a sound process that makes sense, that everybody is a part of building and creating. And I love how you articulated that. One of the
Absolutely.
things, and one of the things too, I know that you've got some thoughts around understanding different types of no, because we all know in sales, no doesn't mean no. It means not at this moment. And there are a lot of different ways that we can react and respond to it. And I think some sellers, when they hear it, they're immediately wanting to back off, and they may say, I don't want to push it. I don't want to be too pushy or aggressive. They'll make up all the reasons in the world not to pursue it in a meaningful way. I'm curious as to how do you address the no, and what would you tell sellers who are terrified by it?
I often see that no is when selling starts, whereas I think no is when listening should start. And I say that because customers have a reason for saying no. You want to understand, is it the proposed solution? Is it the timing? Is it the way that they have to, is it part of their own organization? In very rare cases, is it a never? It's a not now, not this, not with this specific avenue or vehicle that we're going about. And that's where you got to listen to find out, how do you start, taking that no into a maybe, and add excitement and interest and motivation for change. Because a no is really saying, I'm not ready to do this. And you got to give me more information or, excuse me, I guess speaking all day makes you lose your voice, right? But you got to take that no and understand, how do you elevate it to, I'm really excited to do this, and give me more information so I can go make a change. So I think no is a great place to be. When you start loving it, you start seeing a lot of good successes from it. I used to work for a boss who used to say, we eat no for breakfast and then we come back for lunch, So we don't get a lot of no's anymore. It's interesting. I would say culture has played a big role in customers asking us to speak with them and give thought leadership. And that's the other way. How do you change the game so it's no longer about you selling versus the customer asking for your time and your expertise to help them?
Once again, I love the quotables, because no is when selling starts, no is when listening starts. When you hear the word no, it's getting to that point, as you just articulated, of being able to embrace that and really understand the root cause. And I would even go one step further and to say, sometimes it's anticipating the no. It's understanding that it may come and being very prepared for it.
Yeah.
One of the things that I try to implement into prospecting as an example is I know the feedback that I've gotten from years upon years of managing accounts, reaching out to customers, and the types of feedback of the reasons why I'm shot down, why I don't get the meeting, why I don't get a second meeting. I see these things before they happen. I liken it to the Matrix. Once you get to the point where you're super, super effective and you can dodge bullets and bend spoons with your mind, the reality is you can see around corners. You know that this stuff's coming, so you anticipate it and you prepare. So I infuse that type of stuff in my outreach. As in, look, I know that you make a significant investment with my company. And so I'm actually here to add more value around that investment. I'm not here to ask for more money type of mentality. That's the approach that you've got to take, because they have processes just like we have processes. And if you sound like every other seller, you're going to get the same treatment as every other seller. That's where you get shot down. So take that unique approach, anticipate the no, and infuse the things that will throw them off of their process of batting you out. Throw that into your outreach. Same thing with the process of anticipating an objection. Like, if I know what they're going to object to, it could be price, it could be cost. Okay, great. Then I know that I've got to bolster the value around this so they really understand the steps we took to get here. If they try to bat me back with milestones that we've already agreed on, we've got to take it back to the mutual priority. We aligned on these timelines. You agreed that this was a critical project. If we're going to get this done on your timeline that you've stated as a priority, we have to act now. Just gentle nudge here. It's not checking up, checking in. It's anticipating the no, anticipating the trouble ahead, and acting proactively.
I think that's a really important part, and it goes into the ripple effect. Sometimes we get so caught up on trying to throw the stone in the water, we don't think about the ripple effect, because that's really what we're there to manage. And it's almost like starting with the end in mind. And I think that's where the anticipating the no becomes a real big part, because you have to anticipate everything else that will happen before they actually get to not just problem solved, but benefit realized. And I think that's the other part. We often, as sellers, may think the end goal is to get the deal, but the end goal is to realize the value, because that's when really you've completed your full job. And I think that opens up a whole other conversation about the rise of customer success, which we may not have time for today, but I think that is one really big change coming up and percolating that will change the world of sales.
Yeah, no is a dance. If you're in sales long enough, no is just a dance, and it is something that you should anticipate. It is something that, that's why you leave yourself room when you're concocting a deal. That's why you understand the priorities of the customer so well that you're able to tie it back to their priorities. And ultimately, even in a negotiation, no matter how challenging it gets, you're able to stand your ground, stay at the heart of what matters to your customer, your company, and yourself and your team. Those are the things that are going to equate to winning. Absolutely. I don't know if you have a hard stop at the hour. I could probably go a couple minutes long. Curious if there's maybe one last topic you want to hit on.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that anyone in sales or not in sales just has to consider in today's environment is the ability to learn and unlearn. At the rate of change that we're all experiencing right now, we each have to learn, but we also have to find ways to unlearn what we might have just learned a year ago or 2 years ago, because our brains can only hold so much, and we have information coming up in exponential amounts. So how do you consume information but also update your knowledge and skill set? And as I think about staying fresh and staying relevant, that is one thing that I'm working on. And looking at ways to, advance in.
Somebody might have been a high school superstar. 20 years later, it doesn't matter. I had a really successful career at AT&T several years ago, another lifetime ago. Didn't matter. Nothing that I did in that role translates to what I do now. And I think the message is you said it so perfectly, learn and unlearn. You have to let go sometimes of those things that you believe are so hard and fast. You have to reinvent yourself often, rebuild processes, take the key learnings for sure. Take the key learnings and maybe the mistakes and the lessons, but you infuse all of that into what you do. And at the heart of it, it boils down to people and process and understanding the parameters of what you're in, because I'm a big believer in controlling what I can control and doing everything I can to enhance my odds. I believe in the odds. It's the same reason I don't go to the casino anymore, because the house always wins. But I play the probabilities. And so gravitating toward the things, the activities that are going to give you the highest probability of success. Certainly a warm introduction, a warm referral, those are the best. That's the best way to start a conversation. If you don't have that, well, I know where my audience is. I can go out and find them via social. I can create and unlock relationships. I can start a conversation based on what I know matters to them, because I can figure out what matters to them based on what's already out there in the social sphere. And I think that's what's so important about where we are and where we're going. You know, you really hit on that, because it is about learning. It's about upskilling. It's about making sure that we are ready in the best capacity possible to have the conversations that we endeavor to have. You're always training and moving toward your next role. And I love the fact that now, you know, when I was much younger, I always had my sights set on the next job, right? It was like, okay, well, next I want to be a director. Next I want to be a VP. It doesn't work like that anymore. It's, you know, the next job you have may not even exist today. The title may not even exist. The beauty is you're continuing to assimilate skills and relationships that you're building. Those are the things that are going to truly transcend it all. And that's what's going to ultimately define your success. If I could tell my younger self anything, it would be double down on people, double down on relationships, because every meaningful role I've ever been pulled to in my life has been because of a result of a relationship. Somebody brought me somewhere, wanted me for something, and that is the real tale of the tape.
You know, I could not agree more there. There's quotes and there's a lot of research about acquiring new customers and retaining and growing the ones you have. And it is the exact same thing for relationships. Yes, it may be harder to go develop new ones, but the ones you have, you have to continue to feed those and grow them, because they will provide more dividends than some of the newer ones that you can go create. But that's also very important. You need to have a healthy pipeline of both, I would say. And in terms of the relationships, that is so important. It may seem like a big world out there, but it is a much smaller world. We're going to see the same peers, the same customers, the same vendors, the same competitors over and over again. And you want to make sure that you're working in a way that, you know, expands a multi-year relationship no matter where you go. And I think that is one of the things that digital sometimes may be missing, because people will say things or do things that they may not do in real life, but they do have a lasting impact.
Beautifully said, because we're investing in these relationships. I can't tell you how many times I've had an executive that I had a strong relationship with, and some that I couldn't even, you know, there wasn't business to be done at that moment. But then maybe they moved to another organization, and guess what? One of the first calls they made was to me, because now, guess what? Now we can work together. The planets align. All you can control is the value that you put out into the world and the investments that you make in relationships and people. And if you do that, and you don't just show up when you want something, and you always look for ways that you can add value for other people, it's going to pay dividends.
Absolutely. And I'll finish on what Chris, our CMO, said in a recent podcast. It's, you got to bring it. You got to bring it to every call and every meeting, because that is the only thing you can control. What are you bringing to that to that event that you're invited to or have a seat in?
I love it.